gentlemen, please welcome PACT's President and CEO, Dee Miller.
All right, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the 11th, that is right, the 11th PACT Forum Enterprise Technology Conference. I'm so excited to be here this morning. I hope you are as well, because today we are going to explore some real themes. We talk about revolutions and progress around AI, implications for investors, for innovators, as well as practitioners. We have some incredible expert speakers across these emerging technologies. I'm honored. I'm the CEO of PACT, and I am honored to guide you through this event throughout the day, which is going to delve really deeply into an ever-evolving landscape in enterprise tech, the focus of Forum. AI, its impact on how we work, how we invest, and leads change. The focus always of Forum is that you walk away with actionable insights, not pie in the sky, actual actionable insights. And that's going to happen today as you participate in this conference. We, of course, want you to interact and engage with many of our companies as well as speakers here today. We just had the pleasure of hearing some incredible pitches. Another round of applause for our demo pit participants. PACT is all about linking the enterprise technology companies of today with the emerging companies of tomorrow, as well as all that falls between those. And the demo pit is a great example of it. Please stop by and check their demos out. Out these doors and to the left, you'll see them right at the end of the hall, and they'll be there throughout the day, giving you the opportunity to do so. And we all, of course, want you to stick around until the end of the day, which is not all the way to 5 o'clock, 3:45, where we're going to announce the demo pit winner. There have been some incredible companies over the course of the last 11 years that have won the demo pit. There's been some incredible companies that have not won the demo pit. So stick around to 3:45 and hear about that. Yeah, as you know, we do pitch events throughout the course of a year. And one of our biggest is the Mid-Atlantic Capital Conference happening on October 29th and 30th. If it's not in your calendar, mark it down. October 29th and 30th. And of course, be on the lookout for information both on our website as well as emails on details on how to apply to pitch. Last but not least, before I get out of the way, I want to thank our sponsors. Fairmount Sponsors has been our signature, our title sponsor for the whole entirety of Forum. We couldn't do it without incredible support, and that's led by Fairmount Partners, Alan Bourne, and his partners, and we're grateful for them. Please, a round of applause for Fairmount, as well as our many other sponsors, and I'm going to read them off here in a row. We've got Boomi, Broadpath, Cloudera, Comcast Business, IGenX, Fox Rothschild, Cognition AI, Nimble Consulting, Osage Venture Partners, SEI, Topin Merrill, Vanguard, and our host here physically, Live Casino and Hotel. Again, a round of applause for all of our sponsors. All right, time for me to get out of the way. We're going to start this conference, and I want to turn it over for a guided session with Mike Bachman of Boomi and Peter Coffey of Salesforce. Again, I invite you to engage, to share, to connect with your fellow participants and absorb the wealth of knowledge that is going to be shared today. Enjoy the conference.
All right, good morning, everybody. Come on, let's have some energy out there. This is the second year that I've had the honor of being the chair of PACT Forum, and wow, we have, first of all, an amazing audience. Thank you to all of you who are out there today. Also to the panelists who you'll be seeing. This is going to be a day of sessions that you won't forget. Peter Coffey, you're with me here. I'm gonna sit down in this chair since you're sitting. I thought it would be fit. So, Peter, you've been to a few of these events. You're on number, what, 11 at this point? 12
I
even?
think I've been a participant in all of them, and often having both the bookend role of, first and last, and I'll be doing that again today, and it's great to be with you again, Mike.
It's great to be with you as well, Peter. All right. So this year is special. We, last year, this notion of artificial intelligence really transformed the way people thought about how AI was going to impact their lives. And there was a little uncertainty last year. 1 year on, let's talk about your observations about artificial intelligence, where we are with technology in general.
Well, Mike, we called this year's forum Revolutions in Progress, and that word means something to me that I stole from George Gilder when he wrote in 1996. Revolutions happen when an abundance becomes a scarcity or a scarcity becomes an abundance. And he talked about, land that had been abundant before the Industrial Revolution becoming scarce as all the good land was partitioned. You couldn't just, set up a farm wherever you wanted, while at the same moment, power, which had been scarce, if you wanted a horsepower, you had to own a horse. Suddenly you could build horsepower at scale. But the revolution was the rural workforce working on farms moving to the cities and becoming factory workers. That was the revolution. It was a human behavior change enabled and to some extent driven by technology, but it's change in what people do and how they spend their time and their energy that makes it a revolution and not just an invention. And if you look at the abundances and scarcities that have taken place during this last year, when generative AI went from a headline in maybe January, February, to really almost part of the background at this point. It's really not a topic of news as much as it was a year ago, because now people, they've seen the party tricks. They've seen what you can do, having it write your resume for you. I have already seen at least one peer-reviewed research paper whose abstract began, certainly I can provide you with, which is a dead giveaway that someone just had ChatGPT write the abstract for their paper, and it didn't even get caught by the proofreaders. So what are the scarcities? One of the scarcities that was not being discussed a lot a year ago was the massive demand for these highly sophisticated processor chips that are being used to fuel the training and operation of these large language models. And Sequoia Capital has estimated that startups have spent $50 billion, $50 billion on NVIDIA chips to generate $3 billion worth of revenue. The amount of capital that's going in versus the amount of business value that seems to be coming out is right now way out of balance, and unbalanced systems don't tend to stick around for a long time. So that's one abundance and scarcity that needs to be examined. The other one is human talent. I was so struck by the example that was offered during the demo pit of the from Boilerplate, when one of their customers said, my assistant left and I didn't have to replace that assistant because of what the automated systems are doing. It's not that AI is going to replace people. It's that we will not be wasting smart people on stupid tasks. We will be liberating talent, not replacing talent. And I think that's a tremendously important observation because of one last thing I want to share, which is that over the next several years, after 2025, it's estimated that the college-going population in the US is going to shrink over the next 5 to 10 years, that is to say from 2025 to say 2030, 2035, by perhaps 15%.
Wow.
As the echo of global financial crisis, people who postponed family starts in 2008, their kids that they didn't have would be turning 18 in 2026, and they're not going to be there. And so the hunger for energetic, educated, agile talent is going to be way out of proportion to the supply. So if you're looking at these things, the balance of the resources, the formulation and delivery of actual business value, and a crucial reliance on what are your sources of talent going to be, it may well be that you need to keep your older employees around for 10 more years and upskill them instead of shuffling them off to the shuffleboard courts and replacing them with those new college graduates who aren't going to be available to you. These are the revolutionary changes that are not predictions. I'm not making predictions here. I am simply doing the math on the present state of affairs.
Well, for all of you in the room who have children like I do who are in high school, as an example, these words may come as a surprise to you. Peter, when we're done here with our segment, we have a talent-based discussion, which will be led by Allie from SEI. I hope that she hits on some of those points, but what kind of evidence are you finding that there is going to be this sort of talent need from humans? Is it the acceleration of the kind of tech that we're using? I mean, what evidence do you have for that?
Well, the word technology is an interesting word. If I see a big pile of rocks, I don't say, hey, look at that geology. If I go to the zoo, I don't say, let's go visit the zoology. The word ology usually means you're studying something, and yet we use the word technology as if a pile of iPhones is technology, as if a pile of rocks were geology. No. Ology implies a discipline, a process, a means of sharing. And technology, acts of technology, are, to the point of one of our demo pit participants, the creation of a culture within a company that identifies a category of customers, meets their actual need instead of just trying to continue to make the old product. I mean, that's the kind of talent that's going to be required, and it's multidisciplinary. We don't achieve this by training more engineers. I mean, your engineering skills are part and parcel of being able to have these conversations, but at the same time, getting out and doing the ride-alongs. Look at the way the Roar people talked. Do you realize how little they spent talking about the technology they built that allow you to have those dead zone communications? They took that as the plumbing, but then they focused on why does this matter? Because it takes at-risk people and makes them feel safe, because it takes workman's comp claims down enough to pay for the technology, but they treat the technology as a substrate. They could have spent their entire time talking about that mesh communication technology that they've built that deals with one of the basic problems of workplace communication. And you notice they barely mention it. It was a footnote.
No, they talked about the very human elements.
Exactly.
Of the result. Yeah, for sure.
Ultimately, it's about people.
Yeah, and it is about people. And one thing that I find striking, Peter, is, this technology, we've heard a couple of tropes. I'm going to throw one out there. AI won't replace people. People who use AI will replace people who do not use AI.
Yeah.
That's one trope. But last year, one of the things we talked about was augmentation. And I think when we were on stage, we brought up some sci-fi scenarios. One of them that we I think you and I settled on was Ripley, using the exoskeleton as a means of sort of integrating a very human-centered core with this augmented sort of technology to help Ripley navigate the world. In that case, it was a ship against an alien that was trying to do away with humans there. But that said, the idea about using this technology as augmentation still seems to be a pervasive theme in 2024 and beyond. Do you still feel it is that way as well?
Well, it totally should be. The notion that these things replace people is vastly overblown. Generally speaking, and to your point, the person who uses it replaces the person who doesn't. And one could have said the same thing about spreadsheets. One could have said the same thing about the abacus when that was new technology augmenting talent. And organizations that look to reduce costs, unfortunately, will succeed. Unfortunately, they will succeed in cost reduction, and you'll wind up with something like the unfortunate situation at Sports Illustrated, where they took a multi-decade storied brand and destroyed it almost overnight by using AI in a stupid and clumsy way to replace human talent, instead of recognizing the opportunity to actually elevate and illuminate their brand by adding the intelligence to what the people could bring to the party. And this is an example that you see over and over again. hand axes were refined by Paleolithic humanoids for 200,000 years before someone came up with the idea of tying a stick to a rock to make a hammer, which didn't happen until about 30,000 BC. And if you were the only person with a rock tied to a handle and everyone else just had rocks in their hands, you had competitive advantage. But it didn't last for long because everyone else saw the idea and did it too. And that's one of the real questions is what creates competitive advantage? What's a differentiator as opposed to doing just something you have to do to maintain, the base level of capability? And if you're not always looking for those differentiators, always making yourself, look old, then the speed with which you will become, just sink into the morass of generic competitors is quicker than ever before.
Absolutely. There's something I want to talk about, rewinding to your first point about a lot of capital being spent on artificial intelligence, well, especially on the hardware side with very little return right now.
So far.
It reminds me of the early days of the internet when, folks were trying to figure out what this internet thing was. And it wasn't until advertising came along that there seemed to be the seminal moment where the internet sort of exploded in popularity, productivity, and then everybody with a .com domain was able to launch a business independent and regardless whether or not that business was relevant to people. That said, I feel like it's a little bit different, but there is a model for this, and that seems like a fitting one. What would you say to something like that?
Well, there's something that I heard Bill Gates say once, which unfortunately I cannot source as a quotation, but I'm sure he did say it, which is that adding on the internet to a dumb idea does not make it a good idea. And today, my coda to that is today, adding on the internet to an idea is kind of like saying on planet Earth. Of course it's on the internet. If it's not on the internet, it's invisible and inaccessible. And the degree to which, good ideas need to be delivered. Why did ChatGPT take ideas that had been in the research community for a decade or more and suddenly make them a headline news overnight? Because it put an accessible conversational interface on it. Because all of a sudden you could use it. This is what the iPod did for internet music. Sure, it was out there and people would buy an MP3 player and go spelunking around the internet looking for music. But what Steve Jobs did was take the iPod and iTunes combination and turn that into the discoverable ability to have your favorite songs in your pocket, to create that outcome instead of merely refining a product. And if anyone who can step back from the product they're proud to have built and look at the reason why people buy it, will not be left behind the way the people who thought their product was a digital music player were left behind by the iPod. And of course, now the iPod's been left behind by the iPhone, because it turns out people don't want a dedicated device for that. They just want that to become part of their ambiance. They want their home speaker and their phone and their car all to know their favorite songs. And that's where this is all going, is ambient intelligence instead of devices and tools.
Yeah, there are a few key pieces of tech that are even in our audience today. One of the panelists on the AI good versus evil panel, Sneha, she has a device that she's wearing, I think it's from Human AI, on her lapel. And, this is sort of a digital assistant in the real world. One thing I want to kind of change gears and just talk about this in the real world kind of conversation. One thing that I find compelling right now, and I think we'll see during the keynote address when we have a conversation with Claude, is that these models, these language models today, are very seductive in making us think that they're, sentient, alive, all of those things. I'm actually going to ask that question today of Claude. But I just want to get a poll from the audience. If it's possible to bring the house lights up for a second. I want to ask 2 questions to the audience, and just by show of hands, I want to see what the response is. And Peter, I'm going to give this, I'm going to tell you what I see.
Yes.
So if I can see, yeah, all right, that's a little bit better. Just by show of hands, how many of you have actively used a chat service like ChatGPT regularly over the course of the past 6 to 12 months? Okay, I'm looking at an audience of a couple hundred people, and I'm seeing the vast majority of hands go up. How many of you think that these LLMs today are sentient or show seeds of sentience? They're alive and self-aware. Okay, we've got a couple of hands that went up, but the vast majority, almost overwhelmingly, all folks in the room do not believe that AI is alive and well. Let me ask you, Peter, what are your thoughts on where the state of AI is, what intelligence is in your mind, and are we dealing with a sentient alien life form potentially?
Well, if you go back to the founding of the discipline of AI, you will find people actually saying, if we can get it to play a good game of chess, we'll have achieved a general intelligence. They thought that the skills and strategy and foresight were so difficult to do that if you get somebody who could play a competent game of chess, it would be ipso facto intelligent in a general way. As it turns out, once you've built something that can play chess, you've built a thing that can play chess. And someone as long ago as the 1980s said, what we're learning is that once we figure out how to do it, we realize that's not intelligence. We stop calling it AI as soon as it does face recognition, as soon as it plays chess, as soon as it can drive a car. We don't call it AI anymore. We call it face recognition. We call it language processing. We call it autonomous vehicle driving. And what intelligence and sentience are is not, I don't think, any more crisply defined now than it was in the 1950s when they first started talking about it. We know what it's not. We're getting better and better at saying, oh yeah, that turns out not really to be intelligence, that's just pattern recognition. That's just, whatever. So to say that any of these things is sentient, my first reaction will be, really? May I hear your definition of sentience? And if you can't define it, then I don't care what you label with it.
Yeah, I would say too, Jeff Hawkins and many other researchers all over the world are looking at what this notion of intelligence actually is anyway. And I'm wondering if we even want a sophisticated artificial intelligence to emulate biological intelligence. I mean,
well, it's not obvious that we do. Most of the robots that are working and creating value today are not humanoid robots. They are mechanisms of motors and actuators and software that do a particular thing very well, and we don't try to make them look like us. I did see one article on Android design that said, well, it would make sense to build humanoid robots because so many of the machines around us, like cars and things, are designed for the human figure. So if you have a humanoid robot, then it can drive your car. I don't really think that's the direction we're going. I think the car itself will be the robot. I think that we will. The automated warehouse does not have humanoid robots strolling around. The warehouse becomes the robot. And that's really, I think, the direction that we need to go is, how do you infuse pattern recognition, prediction, and learning into the mechanism that's already been purpose-built, instead of trying to build a node of those things, call it a robot or call it an AI, and then turn it loose in an environment that was not designed for it, but was designed for us. That's not a pathway that I think is worth pursuing.
Right, and it's just like even though imitation is the ultimate form of flattery, sometimes that doesn't work in the technology that we build. We didn't build an airplane, after all, with flappy wings. I mean, folks tried.
It was tried. Yeah, it was tried. It turned out not to be the best way to do it.
It didn't work. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's one of the things is that if you walk into the main AI research facility at a place like MIT, if you turn left, you'll find people who build machines to test their models of human cognition and sentience. And on the other side of the building, you'll find people who totally don't care how humans do it. They're just trying to build artifacts that do useful things. And both of those disciplines are called AI, even though they have quite different goals and methods. And that's one of the problems with the label of AI, which I almost studiously avoid using. I try not to use the term AI because it creates at least as much confusion as it does clarity.
Totally agree with that. And the other thing, and I think you said very clearly before, there will come a point in time where we no longer refer to the thing we call AI today as AI. It will just become some sort of engine. In fact, one of the things, a couple points I wanted to bring up. One of the things that you and I have been talking about for the better part of the last, year and a half or so, maybe even longer, and what I'm trying to teach folks all over the world about is that this thing that we call AI is no more than a computational engine that's helping us to achieve an outcome. And so I'm actually referring to generative AI, these LLMs, as nothing more than a linguistic machine at this point. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I'm with you. I want to kind of take AI out of it to remove the hype and then call it what it is in terms of an engine of computation of some kind.
At this point, I think the greater question is not, is it intelligent, but are we going to give it the opportunity to take unsupervised action? That's a tactical question as opposed to a philosophical question. And you'll hear my colleague Kathy Baxter later today at Salesforce talk about the degree to which we believe having humans at the helm, people in the loop, is necessary, at least for now in the foreseeable future, to the responsible use of this technology in the workplace, in healthcare, in any number of areas. There needs to be a human in the loop for recognition of when the machine is going off the rails, for acceptance of responsibility, whether in law or in just moral, social norm of who's going to be accountable for the action taken, blaming the machine. There have already been a number of situations in which a company said, well, we're not going to take responsibility for that. That was the algorithm that did that. And they've been resoundingly rejected, been told, no. The law of agency has been around for centuries. The machine was acting as your agent. You can't just say, well, the machine did it. That's the old computer error thing that was a trope in the 1950s, for heaven's sake. And that is an area in which everything that is going to happen has to happen in that kind of context.
Well, I'm glad you brought up responsibility because I don't know where everybody stands in the room on this, and the lights are dim, so I can't see hands anyway. But that said, when you think about AI responsibility, what do you think of? I'll tell you what I think of first. There are 4 general categories. I think of governance. I think of explainability and transparency. I think of sustainability, and I also think of ethics. Those are 4 general areas that I think about with responsibility. I don't know if that's too short of a list, but how are you thinking about responsibility, and what are some actionable steps that, or at least actionable thoughts that folks could have to lead to actionable steps in their organizations later?
Well, the thought experiment I often propose here is you don't build a house with bare metal wires and add the insulation later when people move in. And you shouldn't be building systems and saying, well, we'll worry about security and privacy and toxicity limitation and hallucination prevention when we put it into production. The framework of trustworthiness and safety should be constructed, and then addition of things that become more and more like intelligence and have more and more autonomy added within that context. It's certainly what we've emphasized at Salesforce, and it's what I believe is what's necessary to make these things happen. I realize that we're tight on our time, so I don't know if we've got the lightning round that we need to finish with.
We do, and I'm going to just close the thought on responsibility for a second. Most folks aren't training models today. at this point. They're augmenting.
Yes, they are. They just don't know it.
Yep, we're going to wrap it up in just a second. But I just want to say responsibility should be key. Peter, last thought. Today, what are you looking forward to the most?
I want people to leave at the end of the day realizing that there are actions they can take without budget, without headcount, and without needing to go get an advanced degree. There are sources of data that they can begin to explore. There are bad processes that they now have the opportunity to improve. Someone said that one of the differences between modern air power and World War II air power is the targets you once thought you couldn't possibly attack, now you can. Stealth technology doesn't mean you can be invisible while doing the old things. It means you can do new things. And the same is true for the addition of AI in the workplace. There are things that you've tolerated as if they were friction or rust or gravity, that there were necessities and nuisances that you'd never make go away. And you need to look at those with fresh eyes and say, wait a minute, I've got scalable, affordable machine intelligence. I'll use that term, machine intelligence, to comprise machine learning and all the whole things. There are power tools available to me now that allow me to look at old irritations and obstacles with new eyes and fix those things instead of just doing the things that I do now, better, faster, cheaper.
Peter Coffey, everybody. We're going to see Peter throughout the course of the day. And thank you all for being here. We are now beginning the panelist discussions here at Forum. This is going to be a treat. Allie, come on up. Thank you very much.